chilly. Storm Corrie will bring the strongest winds to the north, with gales in north-east England. A yellow weather warning is enforced here as gusts reach 60 miles per hour. The wind will be even stronger in Scotland, with gusts up to 80 miles per hour possible in the east. This could bring further disruption after Storm Malik on Saturday. It will also be a windy evening in Northern Ireland, with a few wintry showers here and there. Storm Corrie will continue to bring strong winds across the north through Sunday night, particularly in Scotland and north-east England. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Police pay a visit to a woman's house to check her thinking. The Equality and Human Rights Commission is accused of transphobia. And we say goodbye to the comedy legend that is Barry Cryer. Have you noticed that everyone's a fascist these days? You voted Tory, you're a fascist. You supported Brexit, you're a fascist. You believe that biological sex is real, you're a fascist. You're a truck driver in Canada, definitely a fascist. You don't want to wear a mask, you're a fascist. You do want to wear a mask, you're a fascist. The list is endless. In fact, if social media is anything to go by, there are more fascists living in the UK today than ever existed in 1930s Germany. It's very, very troubling. And it's strange as well, because I don't know any fascists. I don't think I've ever met one, except for that woman who works at the Waitrose Delicatessen who keeps giving me the smallest broccoli quiche. And yet I'm continually seeing online activists proclaiming that they are anti-fascist in their Twitter bios. But the thing is, my default assumption of everyone is that they're opposed to fascism, so I find the claim a bit suspicious. I think declaring yourself to be anti-fascist is a bit like wearing a badge saying, "I am not a sex offender." It makes people wonder what you're hiding. And it's not just people on Twitter. Politicians and media commentators do exactly the same. Paul Mason wrote a whole book called How to Stop Fascism, in which he revealed that he doesn't know the meaning of the word fascism. Labour MP David Lammy suggested that members of the European Research Group, a band of Eurosceptic Tory members of Parliament, were even worse than Nazis. The academic Judith Butler argued that gender-critical feminism represents, quote, one of the dominant strains of fascism in our time. The film critic Mark Kermode seems to believe that GBNews is a far-right echo chamber, even though many of the panellists, presenters and people who work here, not to mention many of the guests we invite onto the shows, are in fact on the left. So for a far-right echo chamber, we seem to platform an awful lot of left-wing voices. Political columnist Owen Jones seems to think fascists are absolutely everywhere, which kind of makes me concerned about the sort of people he's associating with. I mean, where are all these fascists exactly? All I can conclude is that they must be hanging out at the offices of The Guardian. Most people understand fascism as an authoritarian political movement of the 20th century that pushed an extreme nationalism combined with claims of racial purity and a militaristic repression of dissent. Today, people say you're a fascist if you don't think biological males should compete in women's sports, or if you support the principle of free speech, or if you voted to leave an undemocratic supranational trading bloc. Labour MEP Julie Ward, for instance, explicitly called Brexit a fascist coup. Now, this is known as concept creep. This is where generally understood terms have their definitions gradually expanded. Of course, if you redefine what fascism means, you can claim that anything is fascist. I could say that owning a chinchilla is fascist, and thereby justify throwing Molotov cocktails at pets at home. But just because I've decided something is true doesn't mean that it is. The reality is that fascism is, thank God, in terminal decline, has been for decades. True, there are small groups of reprehensible individuals who fall into this category, but they're very much on the fringes of society, which is where they should remain. Those who pretend that fascism is mainstream are inadvertently helping to promote this reactionary minority. Because surely what actual neo-Nazis want us to believe is that their movement is more popular than it is. Inevitably, the accusation of fascism is often used as justification for no platforming certain individuals or trying to get them fired from their jobs. It's a key tactic of cancel culture. If a speaker is coming to your university and you don't agree with what they're likely to say, just smear them as a fascist and get the event cancelled. And it works. Because when the policy of no platform was created by the NUS back in 1974, it was specifically designed to keep fascists off campus. But this policy only makes sense if everyone is in agreement about what the word means. Even in 1974, some people were warning that this would eventually be used as a pretext for censorship. And they were right. Of course, the redefinition of fascism for political ends is nothing new. Back in 1944, George Orwell wrote that the word fascism had become entirely meaningless because of the way in which it was being recklessly thrown around. And the problem is that we do need this word to retain its original meaning because the people it describes are dangerous. So we should stop letting activists, politicians and members of the commentariat get away with redefining words to suit their political purposes. It's childish, it's historically illiterate, and it provides cover for actual fascists. And why would anyone want to do that? I'm joined this week by the comedian Nick Dixon and the writer and broadcaster Hayden Prowse. How are you both? How are you both? How are you, Nick? How are you?
Smashing it, mate. Doing well.
Of course you are. And you, Hayden?
Dressed down for this evening, Nick.
You're always dressing up these days,
I'm
Hayden.
just trying to show Nick up, just starting, you know.
I was so gutted because you were on Headliners with me the other night, and you look so much better than me. I mean,
well, this is my Black Friday Hugo Boss suit that was half price. I just have to.
You've changed.
No one's getting married anymore.
You're becoming the establishment.
You are totally the establishment now. You used to be a reckless lefty activist, and look at you now.
Sending out signals.
Yeah, I see.
Someone from the Illuminati hire me immediately.
I see what you're doing, Hayden. Anyway, well, I want to come straight to our audience here because they've got lots of interesting questions. The first one is from Holly. Holly, hello.
Hi. Have we got to the point where magic wands trigger people?
Magic wands. Well, so some of you will have heard this story. So this is the University of Chester. The University of Chester put a trigger warning on the first Harry Potter novel, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, because the university said that the book could lead to difficult conversations about gender, race, sexuality, class, identity. Hayden?
Why are they teaching Harry Potter at university?
It's a very good question.
I understand.
It's a very good question.
They self-identify as academics.
I know. I mean, I guess, Hayden, you could say, though, that, you know, if you're studying children's literature or youth literature as a phenomenon, that's a legitimate thing to study because it's been so significant culturally.
I guess so, yeah. But I mean, the trigger warning thing is bizarre in Harry Potter. I mean, do they do trigger warnings on historical texts as well? How does it...
So when the Times reported this, they pointed out out that because Chester University had said, look, we have this formulation, this linguistic formulation that we apply to all reading lists. But then the Times looked at the other reading lists and they weren't there.
Right.
Other stories and other texts. They were there just for
So
it's
it's because
one.
of her trans position.
Okay, I think what it probably is they're punishing J.K. Rowling because J.K. Rowling doesn't really agree with their views on trans issues.
You're right, they said it was generic, and yet, like you say, they couldn't find it on any other reading list, and the lecturer had dissed Rowling a couple of years earlier in a tweet.
He had.
So it was a bit suspicious. I agree with Hayden. I'm old enough to remember when adults reading Harry Potter was thought to be dumbing down. Now it's not even safe for adults to read it, so it's escalating.
Do you remember back in the day, there used to be 2 different covers for the books?
Oh,
so you used to be able to get like the kids' cover and then like a sort of sophisticated, sort of sepia, like a sort of dragon posing in an adult way. Or, you remember that? Because people were embarrassed reading it on the tube.
There's all these adult colouring books now.
Yeah.
We're literally just living it. It's just getting worse and worse. IQ levels are plummeting.
Adult colouring.
I had to go at someone once. I said, oh, Harry Potter's rubbish. They said, have you even read the books? And I was like, no, have you read Dostoevsky? That's the kind of thing I used to say. It's why people like me. But why do people even go to university? One, if they don't want to be challenged, why are they at university and why are they studying literature? And also, why is anyone studying literature now anyway? Because it's kind of pointless. Just read separately. Read Dostoevsky, read Melville, Camus, all these people. In fact, I'll give you a reading list.
The University of Nick Dixon.
Yeah, $37 a month. Just much cheaper than the university.
Well,
that's what you need.
I mean, look, I'm a big defender of the study of literature for its own sake, but I agree you can probably do it without going to university, and then you won't also be pumped full of various ideological nonsense along the way. That's probably true. I should defend J.K. Rowling here because, of course, she's written a book for children, It's not like, we're expecting her to write Dostoevsky here. It is meant to be for kids. But isn't it weird, though, exactly as you say, that adults are being infantilised? I think we're forgetting that people at university are not kids. They're not kids, they're not children, they don't... And it's very strange with trigger warnings.
They should study the 30 Years' War, which was about as vicious as this sort of trans debate and equally pointless, where Protestants and Catholics murdered each other over whether or not the Eucharist was more of a metaphor or actually the blood of Christ. You must die now, it's more of a metaphor.
I still have those arguments with various friends of mine. I'm all for the transubstantiation.
Right, yeah, me too.
But good, team transubstantiation.
Some of my best friends are Huguenots.
Yeah, we never hear that kind of thing. But anyway, we'll move on from that because, we could go on about that forever. Let's move on to another question. We've got a question here from Paul. Where is Paul? Yep. Hello, Paul.
Oh, good evening.
Good evening.
Have you watched the new improved version of Fight Club?
I haven't seen the new version of Fight Club, but I would like to. And if you didn't know, it's not a director's cut, by the way. It's not like David Fincher put out a director's cut. The Chinese government changed the ending, basically.
Xi Jinping cut.
Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, you just make
the CCP cut.
The CCP cut, OK. Because the thing about it is that at the end, I don't know if you know the film, but at the end, the authorities lose, don't they? But, the sort of the subversive elements win. And what happens in the film as it's played in China is a message comes up at the end instead. So instead of Norton's character blowing up the building, a message comes up that says, the police rapidly figured out the whole plan and arrested all criminals, successfully preventing the bomb from exploding. And everyone lived happily ever after. That's sort of what do you think about this, Hayden?
I just want to see the CCP ending cut of Star Wars or Bond. What they would be.
What would they do with that?
They could do a whole genre, a sub-genre of Chinese Communist Party films cut by Xi Jinping.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, the Death Star was really well made with no flaws. Nothing blew up.
Everybody was very happy in their designated position.
Yeah. The stormtroopers continue to oppress.
Signed up to the Union. And
the Emperor absolutely smashed it. It's so funny because Fight Club was kind of a defining movie of my generation. We watched it at the cinema. It was mind-blowing. We all became angry incels immediately after. And it was... and now you see how Hollywood's become. It was already left, but now it's kind of become the establishment. In the 90s, it was still kind of thought to be a bit countercultural, and it was Gen X, and now it's Hollywood's, the left's taken over, plus the economic model has changed. They can't fund indie movies, so now all we've got is, they just pump out superhero movies with weirdly different endings for China.
It's really, really odd. And sometimes they change things, they changed the poster for Star Wars and removed one of the actors. From John Boyega from the poster
in China.
In China,
yeah.
Because
Disney didn't kick up a fuss about that, did they?
That strikes me.
Sure.
That strikes me as a bit racist, but I suppose it's that they don't want
to exclude that massive market.
Massive market, exactly.
It's all about the money.
Their principles go only so far, I think. I should say. I think when China, when Disney created Mulan, didn't they effectively pay the Chinese government quite a lot for that, or use that? Maybe I shouldn't say that because I'm going from memory there and potentially libelous, but but they did.
I don't want to get sued by the Chinese government.
No, I don't want to lock horns with them. But this is the thing. But the thing is, though, we were talking about this the other night on Headliners, which is a great show every night, 11 p.m. on GBNews, I should say. We were talking about this very thing, and I was making the point that that would never happen here, would it? You wouldn't get the BBC cutting out scenes in comedy shows that they found offensive, or Netflix cutting out scenes. And you know, but this is the point, isn't it? So it's all very well for us to have a go at the Chinese government, but maybe we should look a little closer to home and maybe stop censoring things here first. That might be a good thing.
You censor me all the time on here.
Yes, but that's because A, the things you say are often infantile, and B, we have Ofcom as well, which is something you don't respect.
It's just called. We're just cutting out the bad humour. It's an editorial decision.
It's not even believable.
No, of course not. But it's very interesting, isn't it? And apparently, the novelist, you'll not be able to pronounce his name, Chuck.
I thought it was Palahniuk, but everyone's telling me I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Palahniuk.
Yeah.
Palahniuk. So the guy who wrote Fight Club.
Yeah.
He says he doesn't mind. He says that the way that the CCP have changed the ending of Fight Club is closer to the original novel that he wrote. So apparently in his novel, that's the way it worked out. So, you know, maybe
his book was already Chinese propaganda. It was.
He wrote it in Chinese.
A lot of people didn't know this. OK, let's move on. We've got another question here. This is from Roger.
Yeah.
Hello, Roger.
Hello. Should anti-vaxxers be allowed to listen to music?
No, what a question. Should anti-vaxxers be allowed to listen to music? OK, anti-vaxxer is a term that has a very broad definition as well. So this is actually about this is the latest in this ongoing saga regarding Joe Rogan at Spotify. And of course, Joe Rogan signed a huge deal with Spotify, $100 million, I think it was, and went to Spotify. And ever since the start, there have been problems. There have been members of staff at Spotify, because Joe Rogan makes a point of talking to people with all sorts of different opinions. Some of those opinions are problematic. And members of staff at Spotify, because they're so enthralled to this critical social justice ideology, this identitarian nonsense, they were saying that we should smack trigger warnings onto his episodes or cut out certain episodes. In fact, when Spotify initially put the episodes up, some were missing rather suspiciously. I think they've come back. But the point is, this has been an ongoing thing. Neil Young, the musician, then turned up and said, well, either you get rid of Joe Rogan's episodes or off Spotify, or you can't play my music anymore. And then this week, Joni Mitchell has done the same thing. Joni Mitchell has joined forces with Neil Young. I'm going to come to you first on this, Nick.
Oh, good. I've got so much to say. Yeah, it's... Well, firstly, I've got 14 Neil Young albums, right? And I've now burnt them all. And I'm old enough to have them on compact disc. The neighbours complained. It was very smelly. But it does create a dilemma. Can you listen to Neil Young anymore, knowing he's an authoritarian, pro-censorship, big pharma shill? It is a bit of a problem for some of us. But it's very complicated, because Neil Young, a lot of people said, OK, this is ironic because it's a hippie now being pro-establishment. A bit more complicated because he was pro-Reagan back in the day. He was quite jingoistic after 9/11. He's had various different views. But he even sung about punks taking over from his kind of rock in the song Thrasher. So it's all very complicated. But what's interesting is Neil Young, he's kind of missed the way the culture's changed. You know, back in the day, it was rock music was the big counterculture thing. Now it's moved to podcasts and discussion shows, a bit like this. Andrew Doyle is the new Neil Young.
You can't
in many ways, yeah. And I doubt Neil Young cares about that because he's an old, rich man now. But there's that irony. Also, he overestimated his own clout because he lost the debate. But I think he's also underestimated how the culture's shifting. It's almost like art has kind of failed because movies are kind of rubbish now, as we've just said. China is censoring things. Art's not as good anymore, but discussion is where it's at, because we're almost like trying to figure out where we are in the West now.
But do you think it's that calculated? Do you think he's thinking this is the way people are going, this is the fashionable thing? I think it's probably more that this is his belief. I think it's a sincere belief.
No, I don't think it's calculated at all. I just think it's interesting how the people have been very much on the side of Rogan.
Yeah.
And it's a bad sort of move for, you know...
Well, he's moved all his music to Amazon Music, hasn't he?
Well, it's not just that. I mean, I went on...
presumably there might be some kind of deal there?
Well, it's interesting.
I mean, that's a big deal for
Music.
Amazon.
I went on to Apple Music today, not related to this at all, but they have now on their front screen an image of Joni Mitchell and Neil Young saying, oh, you can get it all here. It's fine. So people are already capitalising on this.
And Amazon Music, which I have a big problem with because, you know, Bezos...
Don't pay taxes?
Bezos, yeah, and also Bezos on his Instagram propagates endless misinformation about his green credentials. So if you're going to take issue with something, I'd be more likely to take issue with that.
OK, but here's the point. If the issue really is about misinformation, people getting things wrong, don't we have to get rid of CNN? Don't we have to get rid of, every news channel except for ours?
They've all made mistakes, right. They've all made mistakes, as I'm sure GBNews do, continually, on all sorts of things. And
getting you on.
Right, exactly. I say something libelous once every 5 minutes. But there's what I find equally troubling is the degree to which mainstream media, for want of a better word, hasn't reported legitimate stories about the vaccines.
Right.
Like, There was a whistleblower at the end of last year that came forward talking about some stuff in the BMJ, of all places, a very reputable, outlet that released this whistleblower who talked about some of the Pfizer trials and how they hadn't reported symptoms, they hadn't chased up patients in the trials, all sorts of quite worrying stuff when you're injecting this stuff into your arm. And that was nowhere on The Guardian or the BBC. Now, I've trusted Pfizer with Viagra, so I'm happy to let them let them inject me with their vaccine. But at the same time, if you're creating the very conspiracy theorists that you love to mock if you don't report these legitimate stories about the vaccines. And if there's nowhere else to go other than the Rogan podcast, and then you want that shut down, I mean, there is lots of misinformation on Rogan, but there's also lots of good information. There's lots of amazing, super smart academic guests. So
and isn't the point that if you're going to, like, the best response to misinformation, information that is incorrect, is to correct it with more information and better information, rather than to infantilise society and people and just assume that people can't work things out for themselves.
I also think the inventor of the mRNA technology is a valid voice on the vaccines, which was Robert Malone, who's one of the people that wound them up so much. And then he went
on Joe Rogan's show.
Yeah, and then he got suspended from Twitter. But you may not agree with him, but he has several patents on the mRNA technology. He has something to say about it.
He has credentials. He has clout.
Exactly. And that's why they're more worried about him, because he is credible. That's the real problem they have, in my opinion.
But I mean, I just think on principle this is a mistake. But then, did you see the other? So I think it was yesterday. A gay activist in the US put out this tweet saying, "Where's Taylor Swift?
Right.
Why isn't Taylor Swift pulling her stuff? Because if she did it, because I think with Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, they're fantastic acts and they're very popular, but they don't get anywhere near the number of downloads that Rogan gets. If it's Taylor Swift..."
It's interesting to see where their fidelity lies, because Rogan's making them so much money because everyone's listening to it.
Right, exactly.
But it's also interesting that, people that we thought were sort of left or anti-establishment are so fawning toward and have such lack of sort of critical faculties now when it comes to big pharma, which was a part of industry that we all were slightly sceptical of a few years ago, and suddenly that's all gone. I mean, Pfizer, I think, a few years ago had the biggest corporate fine in corporate criminal history. It was billions and billions of dollars for bribing doctors, amongst other things.
Right.
And yet suddenly we're sort of backing them to the hill.
Neil Young's
no
criticised
questions
companies
asked.
in the past himself. He criticised Monsanto, didn't he? He's criticised
so
big
odd
companies.
That
what's happening there with the left? I mean, I hate to... I'm not saying you're representative of the left, but what is happening there? Because it's not just OK, fine.
I'm literally their figurehead.
OK, but it is this thing as well of leftist activists I'm seeing all the time, people writing for The Guardian, calling on big tech to censor on their behalf. I just don't know if you're cozying up to multi-billion-dollar faceless corporations, whether you're really authentically left-wing, or is that just me? Am I too old-fashioned?
Yeah, they're just scared. I think it's the media's fault. Everyone's whipped up this fear that the other side has this existential threat to them and to their society and their children's futures, and as a result, anything's justified.
It's partly that, but it's partly that they think they are the establishment now, these people. But carry on.
OK, we've got one last question before we go to break. I'm sorry, Aidan, I know you've got a lot more to say about that, but let's get this final question from Ryan. Ryan?
Hi. Is Cambridge University full of hypocrites?
Yes. OK, time for a break. Now, no, we're going to answer that. So this is a reference to a court case. It's going to decide, I'd say a court case, a sort of mock court case from what I can see, that's going to take place at Jesus College in the chapel. This is about the monument to Tobias Rustat. So there's a monument in Jesus College Chapel. It's one of the oldest buildings that is still working at Cambridge University. And they're suggesting that they're going to move the monument to a disused wine cellar or something. And the reason for this is back in the 17th century, Rustat donated £2,000, which is the equivalent of £500,000 now, to fund scholarships for orphan children. But now historical records have shown that he profited from the slave trade. Now, there's a couple of issues with this, and the reason why you mention hypocrisy, I'm sure, is because there are close ties between Jesus College and the Chinese Communist Party. There they are again. They've accepted a number of donations. They accepted £200,000 from the Chinese state, and so therefore there are other donations. There was a £155,000 donation from Chinese telecoms firm Huawei. So is it hypocrisy when, given that the Chinese state are effectively treating the Uyghur Muslim population with, let's say, not the best intentions? I mean, it's a virtual genocide, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I just think it's a waste of money and time, isn't it? It's going to take £30,000 to relocate this statue, and it just seems there are better things that you could spend your money on. And
what about the
things that are
hypocrisy
happening.
question? Do you think there is
I think it's
hypocrisy?
massively hypocritical, yeah, but none of us want to acknowledge that we're complicit in modern slavery, and we are. All the shoes and clothes that we wear, if we really wanted to take it seriously, we'd all abandon our iPhones, that are made by serfs in foreign fiefdoms.
Yeah, but what you could do, Hayden, instead of that, is you could just move an old monument that no one's ever noticed before into a wine cellar. And that way you still get to wear your fancy shoes.
Well, that's the equation, isn't it? It makes you feel good about yourself. Well, I've got no problem with getting rid of statues like Colston. I think, you know, I don't care. Great, bring him down. But there are more important things that are happening right now, modern slavery that exists, that we should be focusing on.
OK, fine, but what about Rustad? I mean, the reason Tobias Rustad's an interesting one because, well, for a start, when he died, which is the late 17th century, it was not considered controversial to make money from the slave trade. That's just a fact. People at that time just didn't consider it controversial. He made roughly 1.7% of his fortune from the slave trade, so quite a small amount relative to someone like Colston. But in addition, none of the donation which came to Jesus College came from any of that money. Right. All of that money post-dates the donation to Jesus, so it's not even relevant. So what's going on here?
Well, I was going to say that, yeah, the money didn't even go to the college. So when is this actually going to end, all this revisionism, and will we be happy at the end of it? This is my question. But also, the hypocrisy element is amazing. They have received all this funding from China, and no one cares about that. And there was even a billionaire investor recently said in an interview, nobody cares about the Uyghurs. He just basically said, sorry, bro, that's below my line of caring about.
He actually said that.
He actually said that out loud about 2 weeks ago. He's a massive donor to the Democrat Party in America, but it's just, I just thought it was astonishing to say that. And imagine saying, oh, no one cares about the Jews, mate. It's an extraordinary thing to say. But for some reason, people just don't. It doesn't connect with this ideology. They don't care.
Yeah. So I think the answer to your question is yes. Massive hypocrisy, Jesus College in Cambridge. There we go, we've solved that. So after the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be talking to Susan Smith of For Women Scotland and human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell about the recent statement by the Equality and Human Rights Commission on the SNP's proposed reforms to the Gender Recognition Act. Don't go away.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview, channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So the UK Equalities Watchdog has written to the Scottish Government asking it to pause plans to simplify the legal requirements for gender recognition. LGBT plus equality campaigners hit back at the unexpected intervention by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, describing its approach as deeply troubling and failing to stand up for the equality of trans people. To discuss this, I'm joined by Susan Smith from For Women Scotland and the human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell. Thank you both ever so much for joining me tonight. Susan, I'm going to come to you first. Do you mind telling us what exactly has the EHRC said and why is it so significant to you?
The EHRC have basically said what a lot of us have been saying for a long time, which is that there are areas of concern.
Oh, I think we've lost Susan there.
They are.
Oh.
Oh no. Oh no. Not again.
Susan, we can still hear you, so don't worry. Carry on. We can still hear you now.
Good. Yeah, they've said that there are areas of conflict and concern with women's rights, and that these need to be looked at. They need to be considered. We need to have better conversations, more careful and considered dialogue. They've also said, which I think is critical and has been ignored by a lot of people talking about this, is that it's not just about making a process easier, which is what's being claimed. It's about broadening this out to a whole new cohort of people. And we're no longer talking now about people with a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. We're talking about anybody. And we really need some clarity on definitions and what people mean when they're talking, what cohort they're trying to capture by this and what they hope to achieve.
We've lost you again there, unfortunately, Susan. So let's go to Peter Tatchell. Peter, what do you make of this? Because obviously the EHRC is very much on the side of human rights, and it's stepping in here because it wants more discussion about what is perceived to be a conflict between certain aspects of women's rights and certain aspects of trans rights. Do you accept that that conflict exists and that it requires further discussion?
Well, first, let me say that there is a serious question mark over the independence and integrity of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. Its chair and board are appointed by the government, and increasingly recently, those appointments have been of people who take the government's line in opposition to reform of the Gender Recognition Act. And the previous chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, David Isaacs, before he left, expressed concern about political interference from Whitehall in the work of the Commission, which was compromising its independence. So that's one point. The second point, I think it's quite outrageous that a UK body, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, is attempting to interfere in Scottish affairs. You know, this is an issue which is sovereign to Scotland. You know, this is an issue which falls within the remit of devolved powers and therefore should be left entirely to Scottish people and Scottish institutions, including Equality and Human Rights Commissions in Scotland, but not in London.
So leaving aside that, Peter, leaving aside the distinction between obviously what's going on in Scotland and the intervention from a UK-wide body, do you accept that the statements made by the EHRC, which have been, people have said, I mean, for instance, Stonewall says it's an attack on trans equality. Pride Cymru, has said that the EHRC stance is dangerous and transphobic. I mean, surely you don't think that the EHRC is motivated by transphobia, do you?
I don't, but I do think that in saying there hasn't been adequate consultation is a bit rich. There have been two major consultations, and the vast majority of respondents have supported modest reforms to the Gender Recognition Act to make it easier for trans people to affirm their true gender identity in their legal documents. What is proposed in Scotland is called self-ID, self-declaration. But it's not a case that some trans person can just walk in and declare themselves to be trans. It requires them to sign a statutory declaration, which is a legal instrument which has to be signed in front of a justice of the peace, a solicitor, or some other high-standing professional. And if, of course, that trans person doesn't stick to their alleged new gender identity, they can, in theory at least, be held legally liable and face penalties, face even prosecution. So it's not simply that people can declare themselves to be trans on a whim. They have to go through a quasi-legal process. I want to say that I am totally on board with women's rights organizations who are concerned about potential implications for women. But I know from my own experience of women who work in women's centres, I can think of one in the north of England, where they've accepted trans women in their women's centre for now a total of 7 years. It was agreed by a vote of the staff and of the women users, and they have had no problem whatsoever. And they point out that they vet all women coming into the centre, whatever their gender identity. They vet them to check that they don't have criminal records, they don't have a history of violence or sexual abuse. And I think that is a safeguard.
We have Susan back now, and I want to address Susan about that very point that you're making. As Peter Tatchell has said, this isn't the SNP's suggestion doesn't mean that someone can just simply self-identify and that's it. There's no more checks that are required. Do you accept that point of view? And what do you think the dangers might be?
No, because there are no checks. They've proposed to have no checks. You just have to sign a document. And this idea that there will be legal arrest, we have no idea. They say, oh, you can be prosecuted for fraud. But we've drilled down. They mean financial fraud. So they mean changing an identity to perhaps try and get out of former bankruptcy things. They don't mean changing your identity and then going into a women's prison and assaulting somebody. That's not counted. There are a couple of things here. Women's centres the women who work in the centres are very, very concerned. We know this, we talk to them all the time. They do not have time to vet people. This is a myth. They do not, when women are turning up desperate and frightened at centres, they are not being vetted. The idea that a UK body as well should not be responsible. The EHRC is charged with the implementation of the Equality Act. The Equality Act is UK-wide legislation. The Scottish Government said to us, the Minister Shona Robertson said to us, the Equality Act was the responsibility of Westminster. And that's one of their excuses for taking no responsibility for dealing with how this interferes with women's rights. So they passed the buck, frankly. They passed the buck in all our conversations back to Westminster and said they were looking for Westminster for guidance. They were looking to the EHRC for guidance on single-sex spaces. Now that they've been given it, and now it's guidance that people don't like, they're suddenly making all manner of extraordinary allegations against the EHRC because the current chair, who went through exactly the same process of selection as the last one, is now a woman of colour who is considering all kinds of options instead of, frankly, a former chair of Stonewall, who really was not looking at the women's rights issues. And she is being subjected to the same sort of abuse women have had on this for ages. And it is not constructive. It is not a helpful way to have this conversation, to throw out allegations of bigotry at everybody who has an issue with some of the problems here. And there are problems. The legislation is deeply, as it's been proposed, is deeply, deeply flawed. And we have to ask, who is it for? And why? Because why do people who are not gender dysphoric need this? And nobody has been able to answer this yet. We don't even know what people mean anymore when they say trans.
Well, let me put that to Peter Tatchell. What could you answer Susan's question there?
Which question?
There were a few in there. What exactly is meant by sorry? What exactly is meant by gender self-identity? And why people do seem to have different definitions of this, don't they? And some people don't even believe that it exists as a concept. What do you make of that?
Well, see, my starting point is I accept that biological sex is important, but also accept that gender identity is valid as well. And I don't see why the two should be in conflict. I mean, I haven't heard, there may be one or two examples, but I haven't heard any examples where the many trans women who have been using women's centres have caused a problem. I have not heard of any examples.
But you accept what Susan is saying, that she's been talking to people in single-sex spaces, women who run single-sex spaces, who are concerned. I mean, I know you mentioned that you've spoken to people who aren't concerned, but clearly a lot of people are, and they're not just making that up, are they?
No, I think their concerns should be listened to, and they need to be addressed. I do not dismiss those concerns one iota, but I think there is a way around this where we can reconcile both women's rights and trans rights. And of course, many, many feminists support a trans-inclusive agenda. They support the rights of trans people. They support trans ID. So it is not, by a long shot, a majority view among women or feminists that trans people should face exclusion. What we do need to do is dialogue with those who disagree and try and find a solution which respects both women's rights and the rights of trans women.
And doesn't the EHRC's statement merely invite precisely the kind of dialogue that you're requesting? Isn't that what it's all about?
Well, yes, but we have been through this process with a very major substantive consultation in the past. So the question is, what would be the fruitfulness of yet another consultation? And it seems to a lot of trans people that they're going back for more and more consultations in the hope that one of them will eventually get the answer that they want. It does look like rigging things, but I'm open to further consultation, but I don't want to see delay in this process. We need to speed it up. We need to ensure that trans people have the dignity, respect, and rights that they so rightly deserve, and which the overwhelming majority, 99.9% of trans women, express. All the trans women I know, none of them are the predators who stalk bathrooms and women's centres to violate women. That's complete propaganda.
Well, Peter, I'm going to have to bring Susan in here because we haven't got much time. Susan, I want to just final thought to you. I presume you're not suggesting that trans people are inherently predatory or anything of that kind.
No, this is a not all men argument. I mean, this is what it boils down to. It's saying we should have mixed sex spaces because not all men are predators. We know that, but we also know that men commit 98% of violent crime, and that doesn't change with transition. And the point about the consultation is there's been a lot of misapprehension what happened in this consultation. The consultation responses haven't actually been published from the last one, and they've not been analysed by civil servants. The point of a consultation is not a vote, it's not a popularity, it's to get an idea of the issue. And the EHRC has teased out those issues, the Scottish Government haven't. So we need to be able to address those issues and to all feel safe. And I have great respect for the things Peter has done in the past, enormous respect. And I would like to be able to be in a position where we can all say, these are the areas where, and there are very few areas, but a woman, for example, the other day was talking about being in a hospital ward, and there was a man in a bed who was alternatively being called Albert and Barbara, and he was being abusive. She was frightened. She was a survivor of domestic violence. This isn't helping anybody. People gaming the system aren't helping women. They're not helping trans people. We need a solution that finds space for all of us, and women need to be part of that.
Susan, thank you both, Susan and Peter, for joining me today. This is a very difficult issue. Thank you both for coming on and discussing this matter with me. After the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to speak to the professor who says young Americans are becoming more illiberal, and this suggests a rising problem with cancel culture. Don't go away.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Nick Dixon and Hayden Prowse, to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So if you've got any problems, anything at all, just email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we will do our very best to answer your questions. We might even take a couple from the audience as well. So, a report out this week has suggested that young people in the United States are not necessarily in favour of liberal values and are more supportive of cancel culture. Eric Kaufman, who's a professor of politics at Birkbeck College, University of London, says a huge number of under-30s are in favour of what he describes as cultural socialism. His survey found, for instance, that while 8 out of 10 people over 55 oppose teaching school children that the United States was founded on racism and the country was built on stolen land, a slight majority of young people support teaching these notions. I'm pleased to say Eric Kaufman joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Andrew.
So, there's a number of things to cover here, I think, but this report was commissioned. You've produced this report. What are your key findings?
Well, a couple of the ones that were just mentioned there. First of all, this idea of cancel culture and critical race theory, both of these ideas actually have considerable support, especially in the young population under 30. And so the people who say cancel culture is simply a blip, it's a fad, it's going away, not true. I think that baked into this new generation of millennials and Gen Z is this new attitude, which is what I will call cultural socialism, as distinct from cultural liberalism. And what I mean by cultural socialism is essentially protection, supposed psychological protection of minorities alongside redistributing self-esteem and power from advantaged to disadvantaged groups trumps the free speech rights of people, right?
I was going to say, socially, this isn't to do with money in the socialist sense. It's not redistribution of wealth. Right. It's redistribution of privilege.
Yeah, it's privilege, it's sort of self-esteem in a way, and it's also power. So by sort of rearranging statues and narratives and symbols in the cultural furniture, you're somehow magically going to rearrange the power relations between groups. I mean, that is sort of the belief, and therefore, hey, if we've got to restrict somebody's speech rights, particularly if they're from an advantaged group, that's the price that we have to pay.
Or we introduce critical race theory into schools, and we see children first and foremost through their skin colour and their group identity, and teach young people of colour that they're always going to be oppressed, and white people that they're always going to be oppressors. I mean, this is sort of the idea, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, part of this is, of course, by denigrating and attacking what is seen as a powerful group.
Yeah.
You are in some way leveling an outcome. At least in their worldview, you are culturally creating more of an even playing field. It's not actually true, but that is the belief. So that justifies the attacks on heritage, on statues, on names, on whatever, on history books.
Yes.
And so, yeah, what you see is that in the millennial generation and in Gen Z, there's a lot more support for that. It's much higher than it is. And it's not just a left-right issue. If you take a left-leaning Democrat over age 50 and a left-leaning Democrat under age 30, the left-leaning Democrat under age 30 is much more pro-cancel culture, like 20 or 30 points more.
So this is, I'm getting lots of mixed messages about this because I read various studies and various articles where they say, actually, Gen Z seem to be pushing back against cancel culture. And then, you know, and you use the term millennials, but they're getting old now, aren't they? I mean, they could be advertising work as originals.
I don't know,
I mean, they could be in sheltered housing at this point. I just kind of think that, I don't know what it is now with Gen Z. Is it that, you know, sometimes you see some of their TikTok videos, they're very subversive, very, they've got no time for any kind of this group identity stuff. And then you read studies like yours that say, actually, it's worse than you thought. So what is it?
It depends. Okay, so there's a big gender split. I mean, this is the other thing, is that in that young generation, there's a very large gender divide.
Right.
So I would say that what you're talking about is maybe more characteristic of males within Gen Z. I mean, clearly, we don't have many years of data on Gen Z. I mean, what I've seen in Britain would suggest some of what you're talking about. There may be some change amongst male Gen Zers, but we don't have the fine-grained data yet to pick that apart. But in these surveys, whenever you go, you look at the under 25s, Google getting rid of James Damore, 2-to-1 in favor, right? Whereas the over 50s, it's sort of 2-to-1 against.
Okay, and we should clarify, James Damore was the man at Google who wrote a piece drawing on evidence which suggested that there are reasons why men and women have different outcomes in the company, right?
Right.
That was the idea.
Yeah, and so the long and the short of this is that I think these issues are going to get more profile going forward.
Okay.
And they already are starting to matter a lot more electorally.
But let's talk about that, because this is a kind of wedge issue when it comes to the Republicans and the Democrats, and we know that Biden was elected as a kind of, well, as they said, the non-woke candidate, right? But actually, he seems to be completely in thrall to this new religion of group identity.
Well, he absolutely is. But more important than that, if you look at the public opinion, what these issues do is they divide the left and they more or less unite the right. And not only that, the critical race theory issue really motivates, if you ask, Republican voters, what do they think about teaching kids that they're living in houses built on stolen land and all of the rest of it? It's like 90% strongly opposed or 85% strongly opposed. The Democrats, it's split between, mildly opposed, strongly opposed, mildly in favor, strong. So they're not really very together on these issues. So it's a perfect wedge, in a way, for the Republicans to go after. And not only that, now, if you look at, I ask people, what are your top 3 most important issues from a basket of 9? Standard political science thing. It is now the case that amongst Republican voters, about half of Republican voters place issues around political correctness, cancel culture, critical race theory in their top 3. It's above religion. So this is actually now in a position where it's actually able to move elections.
OK, but this is not in the benefit of the left, surely?
No.
Because this does split them, as you've said before. I mean, Mark Liller wrote that book, The Once and Future Liberal, which sort of, as far as I can see, conclusively showed that the left never win when it runs on a ticket of identity politics. It doesn't work for the left. It can work for the right, I think, because they can unite around nationalism or various, more traditionally right-wing identitarian concerns. The left, it just tears them apart. Most of the properly old-school leftist socialist types that I know are against cancel culture, are against identity politics, and yet you have this very sort of new middle-class left, which is very much for it. So it means they'll never get in again, right?
Yeah, and to the extent that that sort of middle-class progressive left is able to sort of shape the party, then that's going to damage the left. And that's been recognized by a number of Democrat strategists like David Shore and Jim Carville and others who are saying this is toxic, we're losing if we keep pushing this. But they can't help themselves. And yeah, if you look at the data, I mean, it's really striking. The people who are sort of centrist Democrats and left Democrats, there's a big split on cancel culture issues, like 20 to 30 points apart. And so that's just a place where the Republicans, just like Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, they're going to go right after that, and it's going to be a vote loser. So yeah, I think.
And do you think this could actually turn the tide in the next election? Between who's going to win?
Yeah, I mean, given how sort of balanced and finely balanced the two parties are, I mean, roughly a third of independents are putting this in their top 3 out of those 9 baskets. So for independent voters, yeah, this is starting to matter, and yeah, this could be just what it takes to tip things over the edge and to just carry more seats for the Republicans.
So final thought then, in terms of the younger generation, if your research is true, I'm not saying you've made it up.
Right. Maybe I have.
If the findings are reflective of a broader truth, does that mean that it's a long game that is being played here, and actually we're in a lot of trouble, because won't this mean that the next generation are more censorious, more illiberal, and how do we restate the case for liberal values when so many of the educational institutions appear to be completely captured by this ideology?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing, is that this we're only at the beginning of this process of cohort replacement. As these people become the median voter, the split is going to be much more towards 50-50 cultural liberal, cultural socialist. So yeah, the liberal ideas do not live in the hearts, I think, of the young as much. And the education systems where you start, I mean, ultimately they're much more influenced by celebrity culture and pop culture. So how you begin to shape those sort of institutions, which are actually much more important than education, but still, I think you've got to start with education.
OK, very interesting. Well, Eric Kaufman, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Andrew.
After the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be discussing Disney's decision to cancel The Seven Dwarfs from Disney's remake of the Snow White film. You won't want to miss that. See you in a minute.
On Mark Dolan tonight, on the eve of transfer deadline day, I'll be joined live in the studio by one of the country's top football agents, Sky Andrew, to talk about the billion-pound industry that is the English Premier League. In the big question, in a world of online dating and fast hookups, is the age of romance now dead? In my big opinion monologue, it's time for the bonkers new highway code to do a U-turn. Plus my all-star panel, including socialite and queen of the red carpet, Lizzie Cundy. See you at 9.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. So we've all heard of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Disney clearly thinks there's plenty of mileage left in this classic, as they've announced plans to release a remake of the film that was first released back in 1937. But the new movie may not feature the Seven Dwarfs. The multi-millionaire Game of Thrones actor Peter Dinklage, who's 4 feet 5 inches tall, referred to the characters as backwards. And after his intervention, Disney said they were reconsidering their inclusion in the film. So to discuss this very interesting subject, I'm joined now by Chun Tan, who is an actor, boxer and bodybuilder. Chun, everyone. So you've been in the press recently. You've responded to Peter Dinklage's comments. Do you want to just give us a summary of what you think about what he said?
Yeah, so I think it's highly hypocritical because Peter has starred in the Game of Thrones, where he has been made fun of for his height. He's been called a freak, and he has played other roles, I think in Lord of the Rings and Elf, where he has needed to be a dwarf. And the story is about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, so I don't really know how you can play other characters.
Well, it's quite key because it's in the title, right? But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, I mean, this is the accusation, is it? The hypocrisy accusation. Peter Dinklage, who was in Bruges as well, I think, and all of these roles are related to his size. That's part of it, particularly in Game of Thrones, of course.
Yeah.
And he's profited off that because, as with all acting roles, you have to be suited both in terms of your acting ability, but also your physicality, right?
Yeah.
That's quite key.
Yeah.
Now, this is an essential part of your career, isn't it? Because you act as well as being a bodybuilder. All of these various things. Do you feel ever that there's a sense that of exploitation within that?
No, I don't really feel exploited. I think sometimes people are maybe in different events they can be sort of demeaning towards small people, but sort of bullying, but not particularly in acting roles. I feel that's very inclusive. So I have played in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs for 2 pantomimes, and it's been very inclusive, and it's been a magical experience.
But then what do you make of that argument that this is old-fashioned now? You know, I mean, if I think of, there was a comedy promotion company a number of years ago had a Christmas party, and they hired dwarves to be the waiters.
Yeah.
And lots of people at the time said, that feels like you're mocking them almost. Do you understand that point of view?
I do understand that. It depends on what you're hiring them for. I think if you're hiring them there just to have fun and make people have a good time because of their energy and because it's something different, then that's a different stance. But if you're hiring them to take them there and then take the piss out of them, then that is derogatory.
And then in terms of Snow White, I mean, just Snow White is just so much... You know, we think of Snow White and we think of the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah.
They're so sort of integral to that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is... I'm not sure what Dinklage is suggesting, whether he's suggesting completely recasting. What does he mean?
I think he's suggesting normal-sized people, but, yeah, I'd like him to clarify a bit more on that because it doesn't really make any sense. And I think it's quite important to have the dwarfs playing those roles because they are like the heroes of the story. And from my personal experience, a lot of children don't know about people with dwarfism. I get a lot of remarks like, "Oh, is that guy, Mummy, what's wrong with that guy? Is he an adult or is he, you know, is he a child?"
And what happens when you hear that sort of thing? Is that not an insult? I mean, surely that's insulting.
Oh, yeah, I can't really say anything because they're a child they don't know.
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, so it's not coming from it's not coming from malice.
No, no, it's not coming from malice. It's just coming from curiosity.
Yeah.
So I think with the pantomimes that they get educated on that, like, oh, people are different, and it gets more inclusion and acceptance towards people with dwarfism.
Do you ever think, though, that sometimes it would be better if maybe some roles in films and TV and things were played by people of your size without drawing attention to it, almost as though it's a kind of incidental feature of the character?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be really beneficial.
But that doesn't happen very often, does it?
It doesn't happen too often, I think, because a lot of it is just because they need someone that's small to play these roles. So I think it would be good to have other roles that just someone was there as a maybe straight actor as a dwarf.
Yes. But, I mean, if you take the big films like Snow White and Willow and things like this,
yeah.
I mean, they feel like they're... Well, a lot of the argument would be that that's just a time from the past where we don't do that anymore. And it's almost like casting a flamboyant... Whenever you have a gay character, you must have a flamboyant gay character. It just feels like it's sort of out of touch. Do you think this is just a question of a new generation, it's all about progress, and actually it's just readjusting our minds and expectations to a new world that we're not familiar with?
Sorry, I don't really understand that.
OK, fine. Well, no, but is this not just an inevitable aspect of progress, I suppose, is what I'm saying?
Progress in what way?
Well, insofar as there are stereotypes that are associated with people.
Yeah.
I would suggest that the idea of magical dwarves or these kind of characters being associated with small people, that's a stereotype, isn't it? That's something that we should have left behind.
Yeah, that could be a stereotype, but I think with the role where they are dwarfs, it should be little people playing those roles because it doesn't make sense to have maybe tall people, and they could change the narrative, perhaps.
OK. Can I just ask you about your boxing as well?
Yeah.
So what, like, because I know nothing about boxing whatsoever.
Okay.
So you're in a league, I presume? You're in some kind of, like...
So at the moment, there's a dwarf boxing sort of... division trying to be created because there isn't a division for little people. I mean, we have a division for normal-sized people to compete in MMA and boxing, but there isn't one for little people. So I'll be competing that later this year.
Oh wow!
Really exciting.
And you've done this for a long time now, presumably.
So I've done the bodybuilding, and now I've started training for the boxing. So I have my first fight coming up later this year.
And how many people are involved in this? Is it a big league, or are there lots of people getting involved in this kind of thing?
Yeah, it's slowly progressing. So I think there's been 2 major fights for this guy called Little Man. He's had 2 big fights which have been really international and have had a lot of highlights.
Right. It's not something I've ever come across before, but fascinating.
Yeah.
In terms, just to go back to Peter Dinklage, do you think a lot of a lot of people have criticised him this week for making this statement?
Yeah.
Is it really because, look, he's already successful?
Yeah.
He's already made the money, and therefore it's almost kind of like pulling the ladder up after yourself?
Yeah, I think he's ruining a lot of opportunities for people, because if that has a domino effect where productions are scared to cast people with dwarfism, then a lot of people can lose out on work, which is really imperative because they get a lot of acting experience and of course, a lot of money from it.
Yeah. Well, look, this is a fascinating debate, and I'm afraid Peter Dinklage wasn't available tonight to counter his view. But look, Peter, if you're watching, I mean, please, come on the show if you can. Toontown, everyone. It's 8 o'clock. You're watching Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. The world of comedy lost a legend this week with the death of Barry Cryer. He was 86 years old. Barry established himself as a writer on the TV show The Two Ronnies, receiving an OBE in 2001 and being presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his comedy career by the British Music Hall Society in 2018. As you do on these occasions, we approached several people who knew Barry, asking them to pay tribute. This included the cook, Jay Rayner, but he told us he'd rather stick pins in his eyes, which I thought was a bit harsh on Barry. But Dame Esther Ranson first worked with Barry in the 60s, and she joins me now. Dame Esther, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I believe that Barry Cryer wrote on That's Life, of course, But you've also worked with him on other projects, is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, he was a stalwart of chat shows and panel games because he had this extraordinary mental filing cabinet with jokes in, and of course he invented jokes all the time, and he used to ring up his friends. I was one of many, many, many people that he would ring up, sometimes on their birthdays, sometimes when he just had a new joke, and he would lift your spirits and make your day with that phone call.
But he was known predominantly as a writer behind a lot of other acts. I mean, he wrote for people like Tommy Cooper, for instance. I did see him perform stand-up, but he'd always said that he didn't really see himself as a stand-up first and foremost. He saw himself as offering his comedic talents to other people. Was that something you experienced on That's Life as well, that he was sort of behind the scenes all the time?
No. He was on camera. He was part of the show. He was performing in the show. But I think that he was extremely generous. Not all comedians are. Eric Morecambe was, Les Dawson was, and Barry Cryer was. And he just loved sharing something that would make you laugh, because laughter, I think, lengthens life, and it certainly lifts your day for you. And he knew that. But I think he wasn't exactly humble, because that implies sort of self-effacing, but he was without vanity, bless him. I mean, I think he knew what a great writer he was, but he didn't necessarily want the limelight always to fall on him. He was just as happy when someone else got a laugh from a joke that he'd written as he was when he made the joke himself.
It's very interesting because with all the tributes that are coming in, it seems like everyone has a good thing to say about him. And I suppose that's just testament to the range of people that he worked with. But I think maybe, is it true that part of his appeal is, of course, that he changed with the times and he was always known? I mean, even up until relatively recently, he was known by people on the comedy circuit. They were aware of his work. He wasn't one who became forgotten during his lifetime.
He kept working. They say that his nickname was Busy Barry. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, he was on the radio contributing one of his jokes. I think it was about the Archbishop of Canterbury, but it might have been about a parrot. Anyway, yes, and he was joking in his last illness. He was joking with the nurses. This was a man that had a youthful, brilliant, refreshing, scintillating sense of humour, dry wit. Funny man. And I have written a letter to the Times complaining that, like many very, very funny people, he didn't get a knighthood. He deserved a knighthood. But unfortunately, when they're compiling honours for the honours list, and I suppose it's a bit sour grapes-ish of me when I've been very lucky in this way, but I do think that people like Tommy Cooper and Les Dawson and the two Ronnies, they should all have had knighthoods for the pleasure they gave us.
I wonder whether it's a kind of snobbery about comedy generally, insofar as that comedians are often overlooked in that way. Do you think that's right, or am I being a bit paranoid?
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think some people think that laughing is vulgar, but ask yourself, why was Victoria Wood not made a dame before we lost her? You know, why is Dawn French not a dame? I'm really glad Joanna Lumley's a dame, but maybe it's because, you know, she's done a lot of good work for charities and good causes. So maybe it is that the people who make these important decisions think that laughing is a bit vulgar.
Well, it's very interesting to hear your thoughts on Barry's career. Thanks so much for joining us today, Esther Ranson. Now, we're going to play a little game here in the studio, and this is a game that we call Devil's Advocate. And what happens effectively is every week, our panellists will attempt to juggle a few of the major hot potatoes of the day and put an argument forward. Now, today we're going to be talking about the police. This is a bit of a sensitive topic, but you know, let's just crack on and see what people have got to say. Firstly, arguing that the police are a wonderful, wonderful body of individuals, we have Nick Dixon, everyone. Yeah. And you've got 60 seconds to convince us.
It's a very well prepared Nick Dixon. So I'm going to go pro-police. So yes, I think we should try having a police force in this country. Radical idea. How about this? What if we had a police? They'd be like on the streets, stopping crimes. Just picture it. You're like, you know, some of you in London will say, hang on, Nick, stabbings are our way of life. We don't want to change it. But, you know, I'm just saying, what if they could stop muggings and stabbings, right? Just hear me out. Or there's a burglary at your house. Someone calls up. They arrive in minutes, like an Uber, right? like an Uber but with big sticks, or, and this is how it would work. It would be a totally non-political force. Imagine that. So they wouldn't, for example, parade around with adults dressed as latex dogs. I don't even know why I'm bringing that up. It would never happen. But you know, that kind of thing wouldn't go on. And they would help maintain our freedoms. They would never like beat people up for protesting an experimental drug. They wouldn't murder people. Things like this. And they would never come around your house and check your thinking, even if they had access to Elon Musk's Neuralink. They wouldn't be allowed to use it in that way. And so it'd be, imagine it, a totally sort of depoliticized peacekeeping force, policing by consent. Just an idea. It's worth trying. That's all I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Oh. Thank you, Nick. It'll never catch on. Now we have Hayden Prowse, who wants to say something immediately.
Well, it feels like Nick was supposed to argue for the police.
He was.
Argued against the police. It was a sort of rhetorical ploy he was using.
I cannot
which means
believe...
that I should argue for. Maybe I should switch it. And...
Why are you trying to explain his satirical conceit? That completely... I think people... Hayden, I think you need to work... Look, people got it.
Back in my day.
People got it.
My satirical
They do.
I hate it.
I love that people do take you at face value, though. It's wonderful. Anyway, we've got to hear Hayden's argument. So Hayden Prowse, everyone.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Well, I was just going to argue about the incompetence of the police, and I'm not a defund the police person. That's what the Tories have been doing for the last 10 years, and it hasn't really worked very well because there's no justice. You get your phone nicked, no one can do anything. I've had thousands and thousands of pounds worth of equipment stolen on the street, and you call out the police, and they just say, it's £16,000 worth of equipment, doesn't even get on our radar. Meanwhile, they're policing non-crime incidents, which you've written a lot about. And it might be controversial, but you think maybe they should direct some of that funding towards actual crime. They most of the time in Hackney, where I live, they just seem to be stopping and searching young black men, pulling them out of cars in some kind of racially aggravated, lucky dip scratch card approach to policing. And at the same time, they're completely failing to police the crimes of the rich and powerful. Like, they're literally the bouncers on the door of number 10. And they're feigning ignorance when it comes to whether or not that party happened in number 10. They're literally the bouncers on the door of the rave. So, yeah, again, I don't... and this is an experience of a white, heterosexual, middle-class man. The police were literally created to protect my privilege. But when they see me, it's like some kind of instinctual mother bear thing with its cubs. They're just like, quickly protect his assets as soon as they see me. And that's my experience. And what must it be like for anyone not like me?
OK, Hayden Prowse, everyone.
Who won?
I should say, there are a lot of police officers who are doing an incredible job, and I do think that they do deserve some support, but they're not going to get it tonight, are they? Let's get some more questions from the audience. We're going to start with Kevin. Where's Kevin? Hello, Kevin.
Here. And the question is, should we be teaching young children that they are not innocent due to their race?
Should we be teaching young children they are not innocent due to their race? So this is an interesting story that came out in today's Telegraph. This is very interesting. So it's apparently children as young as 7 are going to be taught that they're not racially innocent because they're white. And this is part of a new diversity training anti-racist scheme which Brighton Council are introducing. Effectively, what they're introducing is critical race theory. They don't call it critical race theory, but it is critical race theory. And they're just calling it something different because when people Google critical race theory and read about it and find out what it is, they get nervous because it creates more racism. Isn't very good, is it? What do you think, Nick?
Well, yes, this was horrible. They said they had a 5-year plan. I was like, didn't Stalin have one of those for a start? That was alarm bells immediately. And then the idea that they've got this idea that kids are sort of instinctively will put white people at the top of a racial hierarchy, but they won't do that. Kids don't care about race, as far as I can tell. They don't, unless freaks like this tell them to care about it. So it bothered me a lot. And the other thing is, it's like people have compared it to original sin with these people, but the big difference is there's no redemption unless, like, Robin DiAngelo is going to die for your sins or something. So that's the one person got it. But thank you.
Not many people know who Robin DiAngelo is, to be fair.
She wrote White Fragility, and she's the queen of critical race theory.
And she's white.
So it was very clever.
Yeah.
So I don't mind explaining my jokes.
Or having them explained by Hayden.
Exactly. I'm very humble. Yeah. But the point is, they're teaching kids that they're inherently evil straight away from a very young age. It's kind of disgusting. I think it's bordering on child abuse, and if it happened to my nephew, I'd be meeting the people outside that did it. That's all I'm saying.
And they'd be terrified, I'm sure.
Yes, because I work out.
You do work out. Hayden, so this is the thing about... So I raised this on Twitter, and someone was saying to me, oh, so you just don't think that teachers should teach kids not to be racist? No, They should teach them that, and they already do, by the way. Like, so teachers do a really good job. I mean, I was a teacher, so I know this.
Right.
But if there is any inkling of any racial or any other form of discriminatory attitudes among the kids, it is stamped out, and there is a
So
discussion
they are
about
racist,
it.
then, is what you're saying?
Who?
Kids. You had to stamp it out.
No, these are
I've
old...
got a nephew, so I've got first-hand experience of how evil kids can be.
Yeah,
so I'm not surprised to learn that they're also racist.
Hayden, I would agree with you that children are essentially evil.
Yes.
But what I would...
the only sane opinion unless you have a kid, at which point you change.
But what I would say is that racism is not an innate thing, it's something that people learn.
Right.
And I think the younger kids never are.
Yeah.
And I think it went older kids, although some critical race theorists are saying that even babies can be racist.
Babies.
They've done experiments, I don't know what they've done, like play gangster rap next to the crib or something. I don't know what they've done. Apparently if you play gangster rap by a crib and the baby cries, it means it's a racist baby. But don't you think there are some legitimate concerns here that Brighton Council are attempting to introduce patently ideological and political ideas into school and not teaching them as things we can discuss, but teaching them as uncontested fact?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you talked about Robin DiAngelo, and her solution to solving racism is to try to be less white. And if you've ever been to Notting Hill Carnival and had the misfortune of walking past some kids from Eton, you know that trying to be less white is the whitest thing you can do. So that's not a solution
No,
to
it's
racism.
definitely not. She went into Coca-Cola and some screenshots of her talk were leaked, and the takeaway from that was try to be less white.
Try to be less white. I'm trying to be less white right now. Can anyone notice?
No, because I don't know how it works. I don't know how do you try to be less white? What do you do? Bronzing pearls?
It clearly hasn't worked for me. I'm incredibly white. I mean, I managed to get skin cancer in England. The point is, it's quite dark there, isn't it? It was a mild one, don't worry. This whole thing bothers me. I'll be criticised for this as like it's anecdotal or it's some kind of white privilege. We had an incredibly white school since it was up in Cumbria, and then we had like 2 black kids in the whole school, but they were very popular. There was no racism. Children aren't inherently racist, and I reject that. So I reject the whole premise.
Well, anyway, look, we could talk about this for hours. It's a very complicated, difficult story. But let's move on to another question from Stuart. Stuart.
Hello. Was Jamie Oliver right to consult a cultural appropriation specialist for his new cookbook?
Yeah, so Jamie Oliver has revealed that he employs food appropriation specialists to check that his recipes, ensure that his recipes are safe for publication. He doesn't want to offend people. And the reason he doesn't want to offend people, I think, is because you might remember a few years ago he released his jerk rice recipe. And Dawn Butler, of all people, the MP, got very angry and said, you can't appropriate the rice of Jamaican culture, or, you know, but it is... It's rice. It's rice.
Yeah, but he got it wrong. It's not jerk rice, it's jerk chicken. Then you have it with the rice.
Okay,
so he kind of made a sort of really basic error when it came to understanding.
No, fine. There was a misunderstanding, but I don't think you can commit acts of racism through the medium of rice.
No.
I'm sceptical about that. I really.
Can I just say one thing? Cultural appropriation specialist. That is a made-up job, and I'm saying this as literally a professional clown, all right? That's not a real job, all right? Cultural appropriation is not a thing. It's how humans survive and adapt. We wouldn't be here without cultural appropriation. Also, Jamie Oliver is Southern, and he's not allowed to make Cumberland sausages. I'm just laying that down right now.
Yeah, OK, good.
That is my local dish, so
yeah, if
no
Jamie's watching that, no Cumberland sausages. Damn, we've just made that decision. We've got time for one more question now from Kat.
Is it appropriate to assign homework to students, encouraging them to call out microaggressions in everyday life?
Oh, now this is very interesting, because this is news that's just broken. A course at the University of New Hampshire has told students to confront people who they deem to have spoken in an offensive way, but not just to... This isn't just advice. They've told them to do this as part of a university assignment. Right? So, in other words, if you hear a microaggression, either homophobic or ableist, racist microaggression, and you call it out, you then need to write an account of what you said to the person, how you called them out, and then you get points, right? This reminds me a bit, do you remember this, Hayden, when Sheffield University a few years ago were paying kids at the university £9.34 an hour to spy on their fellow students and report microaggressions? See, if I was getting paid bad wage, but if I was getting paid as a student to do that, I'd probably hear them a lot more than they were actually going on, right?
Yeah, it's social media, isn't it? It's the full sort of spectrum dominance of the algorithm of social media, which encourages us to think that our sort of likes and retweets are kind of scores that we've achieved in our fight against injustice and evil, and everybody sort of thinks they're actually doing something when they're calling people out isn't a job.
No, it's a weird one, isn't it? Nick?
Yeah, I don't have that many thoughts on this because it was near the end and I didn't get onto it. But the point is...
you're not prepared for the show.
I'm totally prepared. Microaggressions seem like another brilliantly invented way of training people to be worse people. That's my take on it. Reporting people is bad. I'm anti-snitching in
It's
general.
snitching. It's
I was
exactly.
I was in a taxi last night. The driver, I was annoyed that he still had to wear his mask, and he was annoyed about it as well. And he said he had to wear it because someone had reported him in the past. He had a visor, and that wasn't enough from this person from St Albans, inevitably, who reported him. I guessed Crouch End. I was basically right. And they reported him for wearing a visor, and that wasn't enough. I just can't stand this snitch culture of people thinking they're virtuous, and it's the exact opposite.
It's such a good feeling, though. I did a great snitch at the beginning of the pandemic. I went down to my local market and tweeted a picture of everyone walking around without masks. Piers Morgan retweeted me. I had hundreds of thousands of retweets.
And then you get the endorphin rush, right?
I got an endorphin rush.
Yeah.
I felt like a really good person.
Brilliant. Well, Hayden is part of the problem. We have established that now, and I'm sure he will embrace that role.
Yes.
Anyway, after the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be speaking to the domestic violence charity founder who was questioned by police after stressing its services were female only. Interesting case. See you then.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So the founder of a charity supporting women who have suffered domestic violence has been interviewed by police after she was reported for hate crime for stressing that its services were female only. Nicola Murray says she was left shocked and panicky when detectives arrived at her door after an online announcement by Brodie's Trust that it would no longer refer women to Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre. Now, we don't have Nicola Murray, unfortunately. There's a technical problem at the moment. But we do have the barrister Sarah Phillimore, who can talk us through this. Sarah, are you there? Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Sarah, can I ask you about this case with Nicola Murray first off? So she says that she was visited by the police because of her statement that her domestic violence centre was for women only. But a lot of people are very frightened by this because they've read the article and it says that the police said to her that we need to verify your thinking, what your thinking behind the statement was. Is that the norm?
Well, now it is, yes. Is it lawful? No.
But it's not lawful. So why is it that the police are behaving this way?
I'm absolutely flabbergasted. I mean, I thought the Court of Appeal judgment in Harry Miller's case would make it really clear what Article 10 is and does. But it seems, as we discussed last week, instead of reflecting on that, the police are doubling down. I appreciate the Court of Appeal isn't directly binding on Scottish courts or Scottish police, but the analysis of Article 10 by a superior court, the second highest court in England and Wales ought to be giving them pause for thought. I remember what Mr. Justice Julian Knowles said about Humberside going to visit Harry at work. He was prepared to say that was a serious infringement of his Article 10 rights. And remember his famous quote, "In this country, we've never had the Checker, the Stasi, or the Gestapo." That was back in February 2020, and I think Mr. Justice Knowles may need to rethink that assertion.
Now, we've had a couple of stories this week that have been quite disturbing. And the other story that I think is very interesting is that of Jenny Swain, who is a disabled campaigner in Gwent, who was arrested for putting up stickers, which the police now appear to be suggesting were hateful in their content. You've been writing a bit about this online. Could you tell us a bit more about this case?
Well, it's not that the police appear to be suggesting that. The police have stated that explicitly. They issued a statement after the social media chatter got particularly irate, saying she's been arrested on suspicion of criminal damage and for displaying threatening or abusive abusive writing likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress. Now, they're being a bit coy about what actual posters or stickers go up to make that assertion. But what we do know is when they visited her house and seized a book edited by an academic, Heather Brunskill Evans, they also seized a variety of stickers, which were talking about women as victims of domestic violence. I think there was also one saying lesbians like lasses, not lads, and cervix, it's a woman thang. Now, I do not see how it is possible for any rational or reasonable person to say that that is threatening or abusive writing likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress. If you find yourself alarmed or distressed by that, then that is your reaction for you to take responsibility for. That is no business of the police.
Because Jenny Swain has made the claim that none of her posters or stickers even mentioned trans people at all. And yet, in Gwent itself, there have been photographs of various posters and stickers which are directly aimed at feminists. Phrases such as "shut the F up," "turf" with an image of a gun, someone pointing a gun. Why is it that the police don't appear to be addressing those stickers or those posters? What's going on there?
Well, I think this is why people are so angry. Of course, criminal damage and fly posting are criminal offences. Of course, the police have every right to be interested. But there seem to be a vast array of stickers and posters up in the Newport area, and the people who put them there are not investigated, even when they are pictures, as you say, of a cartoon figure holding a gun, telling women to shut the F up. So, as Fair Play for Women have said in their complaint to the Scottish Police, I think very recently, they are writing a formal complaint saying you are in breach of your public sector equality duty. You are not promoting good relationships between the various protected characteristics. You are making women afraid, very afraid, that this could be happening in 2022, that the police could come to your house and take away a book because you've dared put up a sticker that caused somebody to feel a bit upset, when that sticker says nothing more than a contribution, a comment about the reality of biological sex. I do find it astonishing. I didn't think we would be here. I thought there would be reflection after the Court of Appeal judgment. There isn't. So we've set up a crowdfunder to pay for Jenny Swain's lawyers. And I'm really pleased to say that we've raised so far £38,000 just over.
But there's definitely a trend here. I mean, we've got the Nicola Murray story where the police are coming to the house and saying, we have to verify your thinking. Apparently, one of the police officers sort of expressed the idea that they didn't particularly want to be there. They felt compelled to be there, and that this is now a sort of normal element of police practice. And now you've got police in Gwent seizing people's books, essentially to check their thinking again. What have they been reading? What have they been thinking about? And this is, of course, the police have absolutely no business to do this. But why is it? And I think if you could help talk us through this, because a lot of people won't understand. If after the Harry Miller case, where the Court of Appeal said that it was a breach of human rights for the police to be recording non-crime hate incidents, or indeed to be investigating non-crime at all, and why is that not the end of it? Why is that not this over and done with? Why are the police still doing it? Why is the College of Policing suggesting it will carry on as before? Are they just going to ignore the courts?
I've got a horrible feeling they are, and I can give some very personal experience of this. As you may be aware, I've had an action in judicial review against the College of Policing in limbo now for over a year, waiting for the Court of Appeal. Recently, they wrote to my solicitors saying they wanted a further adjournment until the end of May for them to look at the guidance and potentially review it. Now, I'm really, really troubled by that. The Court of Appeal has told you your guidance is unlawful. There is no potential review here. You must review it, or every single minute of every single day you are continuing to promulgate unlawful guidance, which is in breach, certainly, of Article 10 of the European Convention. The only explanation I can possibly find for why sensible professional people are behaving in this way is that what we are looking at is something akin to a religious fervour. They genuinely cannot understand why people object to what they are doing, because they are right. They are on the right side of history, and they should be praised for what they are doing. I have to believe that, because the only other explanation is quite deliberate flouting of the law, and that would be a serious threat to public order. So this whole thing is incredibly worrying, and I didn't think we would be here having this discussion in January when the Court of Appeal judgment was the 20th of December.
But is the problem less with the police, who feel that they have to carry out these duties because the College of Policing guidelines says that they do, and more with the College of Policing itself? And is it possible that what's happened here is that the College of Policing themselves have become ideologically captured, and therefore this filters down all along, all the way down? Is that a possible way of looking at it?
Oh, absolutely. But it's not just the College of Policing, is it? It's everywhere. It's every institution. I mean, thank goodness the EHRC has finally woken up. Remember, they said nothing when Maya Forstater was facing an employment tribunal that told her that women like me, who think sex is real, are not worthy of respect in a democratic society. They said and did nothing. Now, fortunately, they spoke up and intervened when Maya Forstater went to the Employment Appeal Tribunal, and they said, well, actually, it's perfectly reasonable, and it's probably what most people think. So although there are some really comforting signs that key institutions are finally waking up, the degree of capture is still quite massive and very worrying. So the police certainly aren't on their own in this. And they obviously, the College of Policing feels very bolstered in what it's doing, because so many other organisations, including until relatively recently key government departments, were saying exactly the same thing.
So is the solution through the courts? Is that the way that this will be challenged? Because, I mean, one of my fears was that, well, you know, what would happen if the high courts were to be ideologically captured in the same way? Wouldn't we be stuck then?
Well, it has to be through the courts, because the only other option I can see is direct and violent action, which of course is nothing that I could possibly advocate, encourage or want to see. I have to believe, I have to hope that this can be dealt with through the courts. The higher levels of court do not seem to be captured. So the High Court and up still appears to be applying the rule of law and actually aware of what the law is. So that's where I get my comfort. But it's extremely worrying, and it should not be up to individuals. It should not be up to Fair Play for Women to have to challenge the Scottish police for breach of their public sector equality duty. There ought to be government agencies holding these very important bodies to account. But if it's got to be up to us, then we'll do it. As I say, we've raised £38,000 and we're ready to go. If we have to do this with every single unlawful police decision from now until the end of the year, that is what we will do, because this has to stop.
Sarah Finnemore, thanks so much for joining me today on Free Speech Nation.
Thank you.
Now, apparently we do have Nicola Murray on the line. We did have some technical problems. Nicola, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Hi, Nicola. Thanks for joining us. So you were visited by the police. Can you tell us about this experience? What happened to you and what did they say?
Okay, so I had been at another meeting and was coming home on the bus when I got a phone call from them saying that they were at my door, police from Edinburgh.
I'm afraid we have lost Nicola there. Listen, I'm going to go to my panel about this because I just think this is an astonishing story. Nick, have you got any thoughts about it? I know we were talking about the police earlier, but this particular case is worrying because when in the Harry Miller case, that all came about because they contacted him because he retweeted a poem that someone found offensive. And the police said to him, we need to check your thinking. And we thought we'd put that to bed because the Court of Appeal sided with Harry Miller. And now this week, this is happening to Nicola Murray, the exact same thing. What's going on?
Yeah, I missed the Nicola Murray one. I saw the Jennifer Swain one where they came to her house to seize a book, which I thought was absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
And this, you see now why we needed my satirical broadside against the police.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm on her side, and I'm Team TERF. I go to all the meetings, and I believe in women's only spaces and also men's only spaces. We should bring back those men's clubs where we smoke cigars and talk about the gold standard. But the point is, Vance, the point is, it's completely mad when police are going, because someone put up some stickers, going to a poor woman's house and taking books. It's just unbelievable.
What do you think about this, Hayden?
I mean, I would consider myself a supporter of trans rights and people that campaign for that, but this doesn't seem to be doing that. This seems to be sort of alienating people and doing the opposite. So I don't quite understand the thinking behind it. And also, why is it always the Scottish police? What's the difference? Why are the Scottish police so officious when it comes to this?
In this case, it's the Scottish and the Welsh police.
Right.
So why is it the Celts? I suppose.
Yeah,
is
what's
the
up with
question.
the Celts?
But to be fair, I'm a Celt. I can say it. But to be fair, with the Harry Miller case, that was Humberside police.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily. I think this is a nationwide problem. I think this is all of the various areas, and I think but there is an issue with Scotland. You are right, insofar as the SNP are particularly authoritarian. The SNP have introduced this very draconian hate crime bill, which would effectively criminalise things you say in your own home.
That's right.
And explicitly
turning
that
your
has been
children
said.
into snitches.
Right.
Imagine the temptation to send your dad down for a hate crime and he won't let you out on a Friday night.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Well, exactly. So there's that element. I mean, the SNP's hate crime bill also has an element about the public performance of a play. And Hamza Youssef, who's the Justice Secretary, he made this point very clearly, that, a group of neo-Nazis might get together and put on a play to recruit people to their... I mean, he did say it sounds insane because like I say, I don't know neo-Nazis, but I'm sure they're not into amateur dramatics. I'm sure that's not... I just don't believe that's their thing. But there's a nervousness I have about the way the SNP approach this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because they are very authoritarian by nature, I think.
Well, that's the left-wing notion that the state owns your children rather than the family, isn't it? When they can intrude into the home.
Well, the SNP had a named person scheme. Do you know about this? Where they actually wanted a state guardian appointed to every child, so that the parents would have support from this state guardian. It got thrown out in the end.
But I thought that was just empty rhetoric from me, but it was absolutely right.
It's spot on.
Yeah, it's very strange. I've been a little bit proud of England, and maybe this is controversial. We've seen a difference with the COVID restrictions, that actually England has become the most free country, even compared to Scotland and Wales, which has been... So we have actually... There is a difference still.
That's just complete incompetence.
I think it's our tradition of civil liberties mixed with Boris trying to keep his job.
Yeah. Hayden, you do your England bashing bit. Go on.
Oh, well, we're just crap and Remain, and I'd prefer if I was French.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Channel. You're on the wrong channel, bro.
Let's not get into that now. Let's not get into that.
In the interest of balance.
OK, everyone. So anyway, this is a fascinating topic. We're going to come back to this again and again, I'm sure, because I'm sure that the Nicola Murray case and the Jenny Swain case, these are not the last we're going to hear of this. And I rather suspect, unfortunately, that groups such as Fair Cop, who are campaigning against this sort of thing, are going to have to continue to campaign against this sort of thing. We don't get our liberties just by accident. You have to fight for them every now and then. So anyway, after the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be speaking to the comedian Josh Howie, who's going to be joining me to talk about the Ofcom investigation into the BBC's reporting of an alleged anti-Semitic attack. Don't go away.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So this week, Ofcom said it will investigate after the BBC's own complaints unit partially upheld complaints about its reporting of an alleged anti-Semitic incident in London in November. Issues were raised about the coverage of abuse directed towards a group of Jewish teenagers on a bus. Now, the Board of Deputies of British Jews says it welcomes Ofcom's investigation. The comedian Josh Howie has been following this story very closely. He joins me now, everyone. Josh Howie. Josh, you've taken a particular interest in this story. You've commented an awful lot about it. Can you just give us some more of the background?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm not anti-BBC. I've worked for the BBC. It's a big institution. It's not perfect, but there seems to be a problem with BBC News in particular. And what happened was, November 29th, it was Hanukkah, and these teenage Jews, 12, 13, 14, were out going through London on this open-top bus, and they get to Oxford Street, and they're out, and they're giving out donuts, because that's one of the Hanukkah things you do. They're dancing. One of them's dressed as a dreidel. Basically, Jews know how to party, OK? Yeah. And then they were attacked by a group of adult men, 3 in particular, Zeke heiling them, spitting at them, swearing at them, effing Jews. They all retreated back onto the bus. They're hitting the bus. It's really horrible, disturbing footage. I think we can probably look at a bit of the footage, probably not everything, but we can see some of it, I believe. Can we have a look at that? It's in line with exactly what you were saying. So there are people outside of the bus, effectively spitting at, assaulting, shouting things. That spit you can't see, but the reason you can't see the images properly is that spit on the bus.
Right. Okay.
They also threw a shopping basket because it's a top deck, hit somebody on the top deck.
I mean, it's obviously incredibly hostile. This kind of. So then the next problem arises because of the way in which it was covered by the BBC, is that right?
Yeah, so on the 2nd of December, it was covered by the BBC. Now, First of all, that's 3 days from that. Now, that video went out the next morning. Amongst Jewish people on Twitter, people started getting shared a lot.
It was getting shared.
It was getting shared a lot, and other newspapers immediately. Everyone else covers it. For some reason, BBC waits 3 days to cover it, which no one understood. Yeah. Secondly, then when they showed the footage, they're blurring the faces. Everybody else is putting out these faces to try and capture them. By the way, that was 2 months ago. Still haven't been captured. Still don't know who.
We don't know who they are.
Still don't know who they are. There's been 2 months the police have been investigating. Still haven't found out who they are. How many cameras are there in central London? It seems unbelievable. So the BBC put out this blurred footage of it, and then this is the meat of it. Jewish people, we like to take time to get to the point. They essentially said that that you could hear from that video footage slurs against Muslims from the bus. And not only that, they said it's not clear at the moment. This is in the live report, and but this in the live report they said it is not clear at the moment, or the person said that what role that may have played in this incident.
In other words, kind of implying that it might have been provoked. Is
absolutely saying a victim blaming.
Do we have footage of the BBC coverage? Let's have a look.
The Metropolitan Police are treating this as an alleged hate crime, and I should say, though, that we at BBC London did watch this footage, and you can hear some racial slurs about Muslim people, which does come from the bus. It's not clear at the moment for the person that said that what role that may have played in this incident. Now, Sadiq Khan...
In line with what you were saying there, but were there slurs?
This is the thing. There were no slurs. There are no slurs. And as soon as that report went out, Jewish community absolutely freaked out.
But where's it come? Why is he saying that?
Because there's someone speaking Hebrew, and I don't want to I don't want to inflict my Hebrew upon the audience, but what they're basically saying is, call someone, it's urgent. This is what someone says in Hebrew. And you understand, the people on the bus, they're 12, 13, 14. Yeah. They're essentially a bunch of geeks. They're very sheltered. They're from an Orthodox community. They wouldn't use an expression like that. And so someone immediately cleaned up the footage a bit, and you could clearly say, and put it with subtitles and stuff, that this is what was actually said. One of the words, lemishu, could sound like Muslim, but it's part of an expression, tikram lemishu zetechuf, call someone, it's urgent. It's very, and it's very clear that when they're saying it in a panic state.
Yes.
So this went out. And the BBC, from then, people make mistakes. These things happen, right? But they have just doubled and tripled down through the lot. This is 2 months ago, and it has still been ongoing.
Because what I don't understand about that is if that was a genuine mistake, so they heard that and they misheard what was said, now that it has been established that what was said was not, in fact, anti-Muslim slur at all, can't they come out and say that was a mistake?
No. So the first thing they did is they changed it to a Muslim slur, because they said initially a bunch of Muslim slurs were heard. Then they changed it to a Muslim slur, and then they're saying, well, we've consulted with a Hebrew speaker who says that wasn't Hebrew. So then everyone was like, well, okay, please tell us proof. There's been a lot of freedom of request information. They're not doing that. The victims, they have made a complaint, and they're saying, well, we can't reply to your complaint until you identify yourselves, which is again, reveal your identities. These are victims of a hate crime. And so what, in the end, the Board of Deputies, which normally aren't as aggressive as this, of British Jews, they've stepped up. They paid quite a lot of money to pay for two of the leading linguistic experts in the world to listen to this. And they have definitively stated that's what it says. It's a Hebrew statement.
Right.
Gone back. They haven't. So this has gone now to the editorial complaints unit,
at Ofcom.
No, not at Ofcom. This is the part of the independent. It's an independent. It's part of the BBC, but this is where they get put through to there. And they have said they're still clinging to it. They haven't. They're basically saying all they've done is doing a partial apology, where they basically said that. That we should have put up on the website that it's contested. So they're still clinging onto this thing. And if you listen to this, if you go to the British Board of Deputies website, it's up there. It's very clearly laid out. It's a 2-minute thing, shows exactly how you can hear it. I mean, it is 100%. There's no way you could hear what the BBC is saying that you can hear. And and this is what the other thing they've said, the BBC editorial complaints unit, there was no evidence to support any claims of victim blaming in our reporting. Now, you've just seen it with your own eyes.
Yeah.
So that came out. Immediately, Ofcom went, we're investigating you. And I work here with you, we are terrified of Ofcom, right? And we do everything we can to make sure that we don't make a mistake here. Yeah. So Ofcom have been waiting. When I did you have to do this, the course, and they say how that many complaints that Ofcom gets, but they actually don't. They investigate very few. It has to be very serious for them to do it. So they were waiting, and now they've gone in and they are investigating to see. They launched it to determine if they broke due accuracy rules.
Okay.
I'm grateful it's moved to that point, but it's ridiculous. All it required was an apology. Someone somewhere made a mistake.
Okay. I mean, you've been on protest. I think we've got an image of you on the protest.
Yeah. Well, you can actually. What you can do is you can see.
Oh no, apparently they don't.
But they don't know. You can see my daughter on my shoulders.
Oh, well. But the point about this is what I'm struggling with is why. Why is that happening? And why is there a reluctance to call out what has happened there? Well, everyone can see it. What's going on? And we've seen a rise in anti-Semitic hate. We've seen. I remember that footage of the cars driving by.
Today, well, this is it. The producers were just sourcing this clip, and then there was a confusion. Oh, did you mean the clip? Oh, we're talking about the one from a week ago, where two elderly Jews are closing their shop and they're just randomly attacked by this guy and beaten up. Or was it the one from yesterday where some Jewish people are walking down the road and a bus load of people go past and start screaming, "Yiddos go home"?
Is there a nervousness because a lot of the attacks are coming from the Muslim community? And it's not Muslims; it's people within that community, and they're not reflective.
It feels like, to be honest, the attacks are just coming from everywhere, and it's scary.
I suppose what I'm saying is in this bus incident.
Yeah. It hasn't been identified if these people. It's believed that they are from the Middle East in origin.
But I think that can't be identified from the video alone. But what I'm saying is there's such a fear of the accusation of Islamophobia.
Oh, I see. Yes.
That actually that might explain what is otherwise inexplicable behaviour. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, certainly from the BBC seeming to cover themselves like they have to go in with every issue and make sure that every side is represented. These guys. It's not about Israel in any way. There were no Israeli flags. Not that would make any difference anyway. Yeah. They were just young Jewish boys, and they were attacked for being Jewish. That's an anti-Semitic attack, a hate crime.
Right, well, let's see what happens. It will be very interesting to see the outcome.
I'd like to say I will be funnier on headliners later.
Yes, Josh Howie, everyone. I can verify Josh is often on headliners and he's absolutely hilarious. And he's sombre when he needs to be, so that's good. He's a triple threat. So every week we take a look at the world of social media. We usually look at the stories that have gone viral, usually things to do with cancel culture, that kind of thing. Now, this week's social hero is Republican delegate Nick Freitas, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, of a place called Culpeper. Culpeper. Sounds like a magical place, doesn't it? And he just about have had enough of being labelled by Virginia's Democrats who are trying to force through certain policies. They were throwing insults effectively. Here's what he had to say.
I was asked by a colleague of mine on the other side of the aisle, someone I actually deeply respect, and she asked me, was I going to be nice? But you know what I've never done, Mr. Speaker? I've never got on this floor and I've challenged the faith of an elected official because I disagreed with them on policy. I've never gone on this floor, Mr. Speaker, and suggested that the other side of the aisle were racist because they didn't agree with my particular policy positions. I've never suggested they were sexist because they didn't agree with my particular policy positions. But I'm keeping a running tally so far of this session. We're not very far into it. And almost every day, someone on the other side of the aisle either gets up and either subtly or comes right out and suggests that if you don't agree with them on policy, well, then you're not a Christian. You're a sexist. You're a bigot. You're a racist. Because that has been the repeated narrative coming from certain members of the other side of the aisle. And there's been a lot of times where we've sat here politely and just took it. Mr. Speaker, not this time.
It's really interesting. I mean, this is something that I'm fascinated by. The general degradation of political discourse. We have reached a point where, particularly on social media, I suppose, but now seeping out into even Parliament, into politicians, into the commentariat, is to just throw around insults like I was talking about fascist earlier as a casual insult, racist, homophobe, sexist. Now, those words mean something, and people who fit that category do, in fact, exist. And so we need to reserve those words for when it's appropriate. But when it's just a sort of go-to catch-all that you can just throw out against a political opponent simply because they disagree with you, I mean, I think we're in a really bad place there. Do you sense that this is getting worse, Nick, or is it just...
Yeah, it's because Trudeau, the other day, leader of Canada, said that if you were unvaccinated, you were a racist misogynist.
Well, that doesn't make any sense.
It didn't even make any sense. Biden has basically implied all Trump voters are terrorists, despite saying he'd be the anti-divisive president. And even on our little scale, on our show, Headliners got attacked on Twitter by a load of people, and you couldn't really figure out what their problem with it, apart from they're just comedians and they're a bit dumb. But what was their problem with the show? Because we have all these lefties on, so it wasn't really clear. But they hated us anyway. This is just...
Well, I think that was interesting because effectively the publicity shot for the show Headliners, which is the late night paper review on GBNews, was released, and it had a number of people, 13 people, the majority of whom actually are on the left, right? So I think it's 8 out of the 13 are left-wingers, and I think that's what annoyed them. I think a lot of people wanted it to be just a bunch of right-wing comics on this show, but because it was mostly left, they didn't really know what to do with it, and they were particularly targeting the left-wing comics who were on that list, because it's almost like they've strayed from the accepted behaviour. They've dared to be part of a show which balances all opinions and hears all sides, and that is the crime that must go punished. It's a bizarre thing, isn't it, Hayden? What's going on?
Yeah, discourse has died. I think it is really important for us to talk to each other and to reach across. It's important that I come on with fascists like you and debate.
Exactly.
I think that is important for the public discourse.
And you've made a difference. I've stopped kicking kittens and things, which I used to really enjoy.
I do think we need to be reminded who the real... I think it'd be good if Russia invaded to remind us who the real authoritarian fascists are, and then we'd stop arguing with ourselves and perhaps...
Yes, so let's hear it for an invasion by Russia.
That's what our problems are.
Thanks for that, Hayden. What a lovely thought. Now we do have some unfiltered dilemmas this part of the show. We try and solve your problems, and I know what you're thinking. Nick and Hayden might not be the best place to do that.
How dare you?
Well, no, I think actually I think you've got the capacity.
Thank you.
To really offer some insight. Let's find out if that's true or if I've completely got that wrong. So we've got this one from Alfie on Twitter. Alfie on Twitter. I'm going to petition Spotify to remove all of Justin Bieber's music. Will you sign it now? That's silly, Alfie. Would you? That's not even a dilemma, is it? It's just a silly question.
Well, there was the James Blunt tweet, wasn't there?
There was.
Spotify didn't take Rogan off, he would put more music onto Spotify.
It is. It reminds me, though, it is terrible for me because I love Neil Young, I love Joni Mitchell. My big concern is that, as I said on Twitter, is that Half Man Half Biscuit come out against Rogan, and then I won't know what to think anymore. Any Half Man Half Biscuit fans? Completely blank.
No, people don't know. You know what Half Man Half Biscuit is. Okay.
This is Lawnmower Man all over again, isn't it? Did I even get one guy got that?
Well,
playing to various niche
I've never
audiences.
heard of Half Man Half, but the producer in my ear just said that he loves Half Man Half Biscuit. What is it? A band?
It's a brilliant northern. You're not northern. It's a hilarious northern band.
Okay.
Who are very prolific.
You have to like it. It's compulsory.
You should.
But the thing about this, it was interesting though as well, because now Harry and Meghan have weighed in onto the Spotify thing, and I don't know if you've seen that, and they've sort of said, well, we've got to stamp out misinformation. And I was very interested in this suggestion that Taylor Swift ought to be doing something, because if you look at the top 10 list of the people who are downloaded the most on Spotify, she's number 8, and they haven't gone after other people. They haven't gone after, who are the Ed Sheeran, who's number 2, I think. They haven't gone after Eminem, who's above Taylor Swift. Why have they gone for Taylor Swift? Why is she the one? It's as though she can solve all our problems. What's going on there?
Taylor Swift can't solve all our problems.
Sorry, you're absolutely right. Taylor Swift can solve all our problems. I'm sorry about that. We've got another dilemma now. This one is from the audience member, Andrew. Where's Andrew? Lovely name. Where are you? Hello.
Good evening.
Evening. What's your dilemma, Andrew?
I'm wondering to appeal my COVID fine. Should I wait for the Sue Gray report first?
I think it's important to wait for the Sue Gray report so that we can establish everything. Because at the moment we don't know, do we? Anything.
We don't even know anything about Sue Gray. Do you know? We don't even know her birth date. Do you know that? You look on Google, it says 1957 or 58.
Is that right? Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Maybe she doesn't know. Maybe she needs an investigation to determine what her birthday is.
That's bizarre, isn't it?
It is not. What you're saying is she's not real.
Well,
there is no Sue
She's not
Gray.
from some remote sort of, island or something. Like, how can we don't know? She's not have a birth certificate.
Well, in terms of your COVID fine, any thoughts about that? Should he?
What was your fine for?
Well, for breaking the COVID rules.
Oh, yeah. No,
basically.
Don't pay any of those. They'll never stand up in court. None of them, whenever that's actually gone to court, they've never stood up.
OK, but this is the point, isn't it? Because now we've got the situation with Boris Johnson and the parties. How is it possible that these will be sustained? How can that be?
Although if that incriminates me in any legal case, that was satire.
It was Thank you. I think we just assumed that. What do you think, Hayden? Do you think he's got a case there? Do you think that the Downing Street parties do undermine any kind of claim to authority here when it comes to...
Absolutely. I think anyone who got a fine after this comes out should be refunded. How much did you get fined?
You don't have to tell us, by the way.
Yeah, I'll keep that to myself.
OK, it's fine. No, it's...
But the Sue Gray thing's interesting. I think Sue Gray should go out to Ibiza afterwards and give stamps of approval for different parties. Ain't no party like a Sue Gray party.
I think
if Sue Gray hasn't called it a rave, then it's not a rave.
That's right. Yeah. You need her to verify reality. Anyway, we've got one more from James. James, where are you? Oh, no, this is coming as an email. So James says, I'm addicted to buying reduced food items. I even know the times to visit the store and get first dibs on the fresh reductions. Should I feel bad about this? Well, you know what? I used to have a friend who was a freegan. Have you heard of a freegan? It's a sort of person hangs around the bins by Pret a Manger at the end of the day and gets all her food for free. And what was interesting about it, she was really posh.
Yeah.
She was really rich. What's going on there? Speaking as a...
It's a huge trend in Hackney, of course, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's like yoga teacher training and freeganism. Right.
Well, I think I would suggest buying reduced food. That makes sense to me. I bought some reduced oranges.
Oh, I love it. I love it when all the sandwiches are reduced and you can just buy any number of them and they don't even put on... There's no calories in them. You can buy as many as you want if they're reduced. That's my rule. You can eat 6 sandwiches for dinner.
I don't see why that's even a dilemma, though, you know. James wants to know whether he should feel bad about this, but you're just thrifty, James. I mean, that just makes sense to me. What would be the problem there?
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's
absolute ledge.
It's good.
It is a legend. And would you do freeganism? Would you go down that route? Would you pick stuff out of bins? And by the way, I should say...
Those are 2 separate questions.
Well, OK. But Pret a Manger sandwiches, they're all sealed. There's no danger of contamination. Would you rummage a bin for your dinner, Nick?
It's like when Alan Partridge said, would you eat an egg in a sock? No, I wouldn't. It's too gross for me.
OK.
And I don't like anything even with close to veganism.
Well, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but it's a question that needed to be answered. Thank you for joining us for Free Speech Nation tonight. This was the week when Peter Dinklage tried to get the Seven Dwarfs cancelled from Snow White. Joni Mitchell weighed in on the attempts to get Joe Rogan booted off Spotify. And the police in Scotland got up to more of their authoritarian antics. Thank you very much to my panel, Nick Dixon and Hayden Prowse, and to my guests, Susan Smith, Peter Tatchell, Eric Kaufman, Chun Tan, Esther Ranson, almost Nicola Murray, hopefully we'll get her back next week, Sarah Fillimore and Josh Howie. And if you want to join us live in the studio, be part of our wonderful audience, you can do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. It's right there on the screen. Please come and join us because it's a lot of fun and we'd love to have you. Stay tuned for Mark Dolan tonight. That's next. Thank you for watching Free Speech Nation. And by the way, my podcast is going to be back up and running in a couple of weeks, so look out for that as well. Thanks very much and good night.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather chilly with a brisk wind and good sunny spells. Looking at the details, skies cloudy at times in the southwest, but there will be some bright spells as well, perhaps the odd shower, chilly in the morning in the brisk wind. Further east, it'll be a brighter morning, but rather windy, particularly along the coast. And despite the chill in the air, there shouldn't be any frost. Some glimmers of sunshine in Wales on Monday morning, but skies clouding over at times. A mostly dry start, any showers moving through on a keen wind. A bright and breezy start in the northwest of England, just the odd shower passing through. It will be chilly too at the start, but the keen wind will keep the frost at bay. Winds will be stronger in the northeast on Monday morning as Storm Corrie begins to move away. There could be some gusts of wind at about 50 to 60 miles an hour at first, but they will gradually ease. Also, a windy start in Scotland as Storm Corrie moves into the North Sea. There could be some debris on the roads as well in the morning, so take care if you're travelling. A breezy start in Northern Ireland, sunny spells and showers. You want to wrap up warm as well, and it will feel cold in the wind. So Storm Corrie then moving away through Monday morning and those winds easing. However, it will be still a fairly breezy day, and that's how the weather's shaping up during tomorrow morning.
On Mark Dolan tonight, on the eve of transfer deadline day, I'll be joined live in the studio by one of the country's top football agents, Sky Andrew, to talk about the billion-pound industry that is the English Premier League. In the big question, in a world of online dating and fast hookups, is the age of romance now dead? In my big opinion monologue, it's time for the bonkers new highway code to do a U-turn. Plus my all-star panel, including socialite and queen of the red carpet, Lizzie Cundy. See you at 9.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very busy show tonight. So many treats in store for you. In the big question, is the age of romance dead? We'll speak to a top dating agent and one of the contestants from Celebs Go Dating. My Mark Meets guest is one of the biggest football agents in the country. Sky Andrew joins us on the eve of football transfer deadline day. Why is the Premier League the richest competition in world sport? We've got another great British game show and, in my big opinion, my verdict on whether Boris Johnson should stay or go. I'm